All right, let's talk about one of the most important things learned last week out of town. I have a bunch of stuff I'll share off camera that's just really, really important for us to do. But I'm going to talk about just one thing that's important. And I've heard this multiple times from multiple people last week. 3 different people talked about it. I've talked about it before. We talked about it in Warrior. And so I was like, this is a really good thing to talk about. I think that everybody needs in the current marketplace. Why? Because we're not out of the woods yet. Right? Meaning the market, spring market's here, saw some relief a little bit. Rates went down a little bit. And obviously the war happened. Rates jumped back up. Good news, they're back like 6.3 yesterday. And so they're hopefully going to creep back down a little bit as there may hopefully be solution in the short term, right, in terms of what we do. So there's one thing that's important, I think that changes everything. And this is at every level. I thought about this. This is at every level in terms of beginning to people who've been with us for 10, 15 years. And I'll show you exactly where they stop and where they hit a ceiling at. But there's 3 main things that you have to kind of watch and worry about. And the key here is one word. And I want this to kind of be your theme for the rest of the year and how you live your life. And it's also the 3 biggest things that hold leaders and hold salespeople back from where they're at and where they need to go. And number 1, right, the word, show you guys, you can take a guess, starts with A. Authority, what else? Action, what else? Accountability, close. Alignment. What does that mean? Alignment, and there's 3 different ways to this. And this is so true. I heard multiple people talk about it. Buddy Dustin talked about it with me a lot. We were just talking about it, but it's so true in terms of how it breaks down. And so the key part's alignment. There's 3 main pieces of alignment. And so what do you guys think the first most important part of alignment is? Integrity. Keep going. What else? Discipline. Okay. The first piece here is alignment with self. It's the first most important part. I kind of got ahead of myself. Anybody know what the most, like one of the strongest shapes is? Triangle. Why? Right? Just the way that things kind of come together, hold force on the outside, and so this is the same way this piece does. But first piece, alignment with self, and it's by far number 1. What do you think alignment with self means?
What you do when no one's watching.
Right? You go look at it, what you do when no one's watching it, that would be a word like what? Integrity. Right? Because nothing else matters on that integrity. And so it goes back to like this part, I'll just put how many. How many people you know they're living a lie, right? They say they want something, but the problem is what they do doesn't align with what they want. Right? This is level 1. This is entry level stuff, right? But it's so important to go back and cross check of where I'm at. Everyone is a work in progress with this. Some are further than others. Right? This one here is going to be where the veterans are at, what holds them back a lot. I'll kind of show you. With that, but that's the key part. Number 1, alignment with self. And the key, most important word here is integrity. What's the definition of integrity, you guys think? Just off the top of your head.
What you do when no one's watching.
Yeah, so integrity, right? Broken down is integrity is doing the right thing, especially when no one's watching. And so that's a key part in terms of what we do, right? And they say they want the thing, but what happens? Most people say they want the thing, but what do they end up doing? Not the thing that gets the thing, right? And so it comes down to 2 main things. And we always talked about this a long time ago, but I've kind of added my own stuff in this. Number 1 reason you see that is inner conflict. What does that mean? Kind of. What else do you think? Inner conflict. What does that mean, you think?
Battle with yourself and your mental mind.
Okay. How?
We talk about like where you want to be and where you are and making the changes necessary to get there.
The thing they want doesn't align with their values. What's a hint? What does that mean, you think?
You have to change. You have to evolve.
So I want to make a lot of money, but I want to have a lot of time at home. Right? I want to make a lot of money, but I don't want to make phone calls and talk to people. That's why you see agents, they come in, they'll tend to avoid. Right? One of the big things I'll talk about today, too, we talked a lot about last week, is just avoidance. People will do anything and everything to have avoidance and avoid the thing they need to do. So, for example, I want to make a lot of money, so I'm not going to make the call, so what do they end up doing? I want to be a social media star, right? I'm going to do social media. And that's a good supplementation, but it never actually fixes the real requirement, which is to do what? Have conversation with people and make phone calls. And so inner conflicts, I want the thing, but I'm not really willing to do the thing, okay? So like my value doesn't align. So my value is that I want time necessarily with my family or whatever it is, time with myself or enjoyment on travel all the time, but at the same time I want a lot of money, right? And unfortunately, in many cases in real life, that doesn't align with the actual value. Does that make sense? And so you got to check yourself of your values and say, okay, what do I really want? Do I really want money, or do I want to sit here and have flexibility and have, no structure, right? People come into real estate, a lot of times they say, well, I don't want structure. I don't want to use scripts. I don't want to use these things. And so that's a definition of what? Inner conflict, because what's required does not align with what actually you want to do. Now, no one wants to actually do that. You have to define a way where I get out of conflict and what I truly want, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get there. Does that make sense? And those are things like make phone calls, follow up, have discipline, self-development. All those things are what matters to make sure I can get the thing I want, which is what my true value is. And so the reason I share that is because you got to question yourself, okay, what is my true value and what do I truly desire? Right? How bad do I want success and what am I willing to pay for it? Right? That's the key part of that. Second thing that comes along with this, which is also a second part of that, is conditions. What does that mean, you think?
Conditions on how you operate.
Like what?
Like if I just make the $100, am I okay with just making the $100, or am I somebody that does $100 and I didn't talk to anybody, but I'm still going to push to talk to somebody? That's my condition.
The conditions, I'll do everything except the thing. Right? I'm going to do whatever it takes, Blake, to be successful, except 100% attendance ratio, right? Or except making 20 connects a day, right? Everybody will do everything except the thing. And so what they do is they put conditions on what they're willing to do to be successful. And so that's a violation of alignment with self. Does that make sense? Why? Because what I say I want, aka my value, needs to match what? My action. Does that make sense? And so I even wrote a bunch of notes about that, kind of just stuff I've seen. And I'll kind of break that in the last part of it. But it's a big example where you kind of run into it in what that is. Here's my 20 things I was going to show you. But like a great example of that is just how people show up, right? I want to lose weight, but they're not willing to do the piece, right? They'll still eat the cookie when it comes to the opportunity. And so here's one thing we talked about really is that so many people are out of integrity with self. I want you to write this down. Life is so much harder when you're out of integrity with self. What does that mean? Life is so much harder when you're out of integrity with self.
Because you're having to faith.
Yep, right? And so most people, right, say they value something. Here's another thing, kind of write it down, a part of that, is that you are not what you say you value, you are what your behaviors value. Does that make sense? And some people say they want the thing, but what's really the determining factor here? My behavior. And so that's where alignment with self comes in as a summary, is what's my behavior in terms of my alignment with self and what I say I want, aka my goal, aka what I say my outcome needs to be, my desire, and what that looks like. Okay? That's very important. And so the opposite part of doing the behavior would be, number one, avoidance, or just flat out not doing it, right? That could be anything from health and fitness, right? I can say I want to be healthy and fit, but if my behavior doesn't align with that, what happens? I'm not in alignment, right? And so then what follows that?
Failure.
Results, right? And so it goes, my belief, what I claim is, then my actions and my results. Does that make sense? So if my actions don't align, we can look at the person in 2 seconds and say, guess what? I know that person's out of alignment with self because what they're saying is not aligning with what they're doing, and you can see through that in 2 seconds. Would you guys agree? Right? And so that's a key part of why this matters, because this is what brings certainty, which sells everything else for the rest of the part. Does that make sense? And so if I'm out of alignment with self, what are the chances anybody else is going to follow me? Not much, right? And so that's very important to look at. And so that's a key part of that as well, right? You can say you want the health and fitness, but if your behavior and therefore your results are not in alignment, you'll never get what you want. You can say you value your family, but if you're not in alignment with investing into your family, you're not in alignment, right? Your behavior has to match your values. And so all of that comes down to one thing we just talked about, which is principles. And so am I picking, and here's the thing, if I want something and I'm not sure what to do, what do you need to do? If you want something, you're not sure exactly what to do, what do you do?
Look at somebody else.
Get some help, right? From someone who has what you want, right? Typically, if it's business, something, it'd be myself or anybody with leadership, right? And you say, hey, what are the principles that I'm missing that I should be abiding by? Because it's all principles. Show up, make some phone calls, go through a script, go through a process, follow the process. And typically, if I'm willing to be honest with myself and truly in alignment, I can diagnose that very quickly. Does that make sense? Everybody knows what to do. What's the problem? Just don't do it. And so that's where the key part and the first most important part of alignment comes in, is alignment with self. Does that make sense, you guys? Mm-hmm. And so that's why it's the first, because nothing else matters besides that. Second one, right? Matters for most of you. Some of you may not a little bit, but ideally that's going to be alignment. The second part is at home. This is a make or break for most people, right? They have to have alignment at home. What does that mean, you think?
Everything needs to be okay.
Yeah. And so First, most important piece of that's going to be what? Spouse. Alignment with spouse. So what does that mean?
They have to be on the same page you are. Basically, like, me and my wife, we have goals, so, like, I just can't come home at 2 o'clock and hit my goals. It's just not gonna happen with me and my family, so she's in alignment with those.
Yeah, so number one, spouse has to be in alignment with what your mission and values are. What's my mission as a family? AK, what are we going for? What are we pushing for? Right? What's our goals long term? 3-year goal, 5-year goal, 10-year goal. Like, what's our goal? And here's the problem. Most people, if they have a spouse, if we went and asked your spouse and called up and say, hey, what's so-and-so's 3-year goal, 5-year goal, 10-year goal? How many do you think will answer that question? Very few. But then we question why they're not in alignment and they're not a part of the mission and part of the vision of where we're going long term. Does this make sense? Why is it so important to have a spouse on board? It's the number one killer of anybody in business in most cases, because you go through tough stuff here. They're not sure what you go through. They have no clue what you go through. They don't even know what your mission or value is. And you go home, and what happens? More conflict, more issues. It then creates doubt in you, and obviously a person gets out of the business in any business. Does this make sense? One of the people last week was talking about, they're from Hawaii, their hiring process, anybody on their team, they go meet with that potential agent and their spouse and have a dinner. And they talk to them and say, hey, look, what's your relationship like? What's your support like? Hey, if so-and-so gets in a tough situation, how are you going to support them? Which I was like, that's pretty powerful, right, to do. But here's the key part. Most people don't have alignment support with their spouse because of why?
Communication.
Deeper. They're not in alignment with self. I'll go and tell my wife, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Man, I'm going to get in real estate. I'm going to be successful. I'm going to crush it. I'm going to be like so-and-so, right? And I'm going to sell all these houses. And what do they think? Oh, here's another one, right? Great, this is another one. You told me last 3 jobs you're going to do this and do this and do this and do this and do this. And so that's why alignment with self is so important. Because not until I prove that I'm aligned with self that I stick to my word, say what I was going to do, what I was going to do, that I have this piece here in the spouse part. Does this make sense? And if you don't have a spouse yet, guess what? You start planning for that and start working on that now, right? And it could be obviously boyfriend, girlfriend, and or husband, wife. Does it make sense? And so this is important, though. So what's the key part of that? Number one, I get clear what my mission is, right? What's the vision? Why is that so important? I need buy-in, right? I need them to buy in on what I'm making sacrifices for. Because if they're bought into the mission, they're bought into the value of what's happening and changing lives and impacting people and helping them create home ownership and help do all these things. And they got to be bought into, number one, what you do, why you do it. Number 3 is the long-term vision of why this is important, why the sacrifice is important. Does that make sense? We're going to buy our own house to have together. We're going to buy a rental property, investment property, new car, whatever it is. There's got to be something tied to that. And number 1, they got to be able to trust you that you're going to stay in alignment with yourself so you can follow through and get what you need to get done. Does that make sense? Questions on that? Very important person, right? And so that's a key thing there you have with that. And so I wrote down here, right? Number 1, the spouse must have here, you must have trust. And that means trust that what? That you're going to follow through and do what you say and do. If they watch you come in and go, and here's the thing, a lot of people come here and they leave their spouse or kids all day. Not a lot, a few people come here over time, right? They leave their spouse and kids all day, stay 6-8 hours away, and go home. And guess what? They didn't do no dials, no conversations. And so you got to get in alignment with all this, where if I'm away from home and I'm actually hitting the mission, I make it worth it being away from my family. Does that make sense? And so that's where these things come in, where all this is in alignment. And that's why self is by far the most important. Make sense? Very important part here. And so again, I wrote mission, vision, right? Number 3, that you actually show up and you actually follow through. Right? You actually show up and you actually follow through. Why? Yeah, and you're going to have trust, right? Which is by far the number 1 single most important thing. They have to trust you actually doing what you say you're going to do, that you are who you are. And we used to do this a lot in Warrior. Garrett would bring the spouse in, interview the spouse. And most time, the husband had patterns of doing stuff, not doing stuff, doing stuff, not doing stuff. And most of the time, what was the husband doing, you think? In terms of work and results? Over-promising what he was going to do and never actually following through. And so when you went to the party, hey, how much your wife trusts you in terms of how you're actually doing, basically producing for your family, the results over time have shown what? Ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs, no consistency, right? And the guy would be like, well, 8 or 9. Interview the wife, guess what she'd say? 2 or 3. I mean, over and over and over. And Garrett did this example Number one, to expose the men to themselves. Like, look, you think it's one thing, but the reality is another thing. Because there's so many times that, and here's the thing. Let's say I screwed this up for many years, right? And I need to correct that, and I need to get buy-in. What do I got to do? Number one, be honest. Admit, hey, look, I know I've kind of dropped the ball in the past. I'm going to get 100% in on myself. I'm going to be all in with alignment with myself, and then I got to do what? Yeah, you got to build it, which I was going to write the word prove, which is exactly what Maddie said, which is to build it. And that takes a little bit of what? Time. The problem is people want that instantly. You can't screw things up for 5, 10, 15 years and build trust back in 2 months. Right? And so this is why these things are so important. The good news is it compounds. It compounds over and over and over and over this. And so this is the key part here, because this part helps you get through the tough times, right, when you need it, but also it helps keep you from being taken down in the tough times as well. It's either a giant magnifier for you, or it's actually a giant detractor based on what it is. There's 3 main things, too, that you must have in a relationship. Number 1, trust. Talked about that. Number 2, respect. Right? Which is important. And number 3, intimacy. So weird when people talk about, but if I just have trust and respect, then what you got? Just a friend, right? Just friendship. And so that's why that's important. Let's say intimacy stuff, right? Well, guess what? You got to make a decision to work on that, because that's what keeps this all together in that part. And one of the things we talked about last week, and I used to talk about, you probably remember me teaching this before, what's the number 1 killer in relationships? You remember? I used to talk about resentment, right? And resentment's usually number 1 killer in any relationship, both business, friendship, or relationship. But most marriages, even business, the number 1 killer in relationships, learned this one last week, which was helpful, slippage. What does that mean, you think? Slippage. Slowly drifting away. I don't make the investment, everything's fine, everything's fine, everything's fine, everything else, boom, everything's not fine. She's having an affair, right? Or he's having an affair, right? I'm not overweight, right? I'm in healthy, I'm pretty decent, I'm not too bad, not too bad, not too bad. Holy shit, how'd I get 20 pounds overweight? Right? It always happens in slippage. Money's okay, money's okay, money's okay. Holy shit, I'm losing, I have no money in the bank account, no pending deals. Right? Everything typically happens with slippage. And so our job here is to make sure I'm fully in alignment, and that I do what? Proactively. I proactively attack this. And what does that mean? Make small deposits every single day. Right? Which is hard, but I'm doing everything else. But here's the key part. I have to have this part, or business is not going to work. You guys with me on this? And many of y'all, myself included, on both sides of that equation, right, over the years. Thankfully, I was just crazy enough to keep pushing no matter what. But I've learned over time that this is such a key part. It's the anchor that helps hold everything together whenever you need, the glue that holds everything together when you need it. But here's the thing. If I don't have a clear vision and mission, guess what I need to do? Sit down and have a conversation. All right, I was talking to a buddy last week. They have family meetings weekly about here's where we're at, here's where it's going. Hey, look, here's why Daddy has to go away and work a little bit of time. Right? Luke's at the point every morning when I leave, what do you think he says? Daddy, please don't go to work. Please don't go to work. You don't got to go to work today. Right? And so I have to say, buddy, I got a mission. I got to help people. I got to teach people. Today, don't let me go. I said, hey, today's meeting day. Right? Daddy's got to teach people. Daddy's going to help people today. And he's, okay, I love you, Daddy. Right? It's one of those things that starts with what? Breaks your heart. At the same time, guess what's more important? The mission, the vision. Why? Because I know his life doesn't work very long term if I don't fight for the mission and do what needs to be done. How do I know that? Because my dad didn't do that. Okay? And so it's very, very important to understand that overall, that you got to make sure you have this part in line. Make sense, you guys here? It's a tough one, right? It's almost emotional one to talk about, but it's by far key. And then third, doesn't matter about the first two. What do you think the third one is? Business. You nailed it. The third piece here is business. I have to have alignment with business. What does that mean? This is where many of the veterans end up getting stuck too. They get the business, they get pretty good. It rides. A lot of times it gets stuck right here. And it gets stopped, and I'll show you why in a second. But number 1, business. And what do you think alignment with business means? What does that mean ideally? Yep. Number 1, you're aligned with culture. Like who we are, what we do here, right? My job is to obviously have a culture of people who produce and make it uncomfortable for those that don't produce. Why is that? Because that's culture that drives for results, which is what we're all here for, right? Second part here is values, which is the values in terms of what we do. which comes down to our core values, right? And then third piece here are principles. The three most important principles. Anybody know the three things I've been talking about the most lately for the past probably 8-9 months? Number one, massive what? Personal responsibility. Close. Personal responsibility. What does that mean? I own everything. I own the good and the bad. Every result of my life, I own it. Why? If I don't own it, I can't change it. Take control and personal responsibility. The only way, so I learned this through Garrett, the only way you can change anything in your life is personal responsibility. Meaning, I own all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly, even if it's not my fault. Bad marriage, right? Guess what? Your fault. Either you did it or you picked him. Either one, right? And so, it is what it is. And that's just a way to look at things. And so I can either fix it in terms of how I show up and lead from the front and make sure I get all this and I clean my side of the street up. Then it makes it very uncomfortable for them not to clean their side of the street up. But if they don't do it, then I move on. Right? That's just a choice that you have. But at that point, I'm the one that controls the outcome, not a victim circumstance. Does that make sense? And so nothing else changes. Your sales are down, guess what? Personal responsibility. That's important. What is number two? Personal development. Right? Personal development means what? I've got to figure out one of two things. Skill set or the mindset that gets the result I want, right? I have to be obsessed with this. And so many people in this business, and I was talking this last week, a lot of people, just even team leaders get in the same way, right? They get to a place, they get stuck, they've done things so long a certain way, and then what do they stop doing? The personal development. And so they're not plugged into energy, they're not plugged into sales training, they're not plugged into objection handling. So they're just doing the same old, getting their brains beat out over and over and over. They're getting decent result, so it's hard for them to change. And so you watch people that they get burned out. The number one thing that gets you burned out is you're not doing personal development, period. Why? Because you're getting beat up in a tough market, you're not changing. And so many people do is try to change the external circumstance and don't fix the internal circumstance, which never actually changes the person, which ultimately is you is causing the problem. Make sense? Is at my level just the same. And so it's important to understand if I'm stuck anywhere in this business, the only thing you need to do is these two things right here and get you through wherever you're at. It may suck, right? And I had a collision with Ryan a way back. Hey man, energy's a little bit off, right? And I say, two things you gotta do. Number one, personal development. He dove back into personal development. What happened?
Pretty great, man. I feel great anymore.
How'd you feel within days?
I felt like, man, I kind of earned what I was getting.
So number one, you felt enlightened from people, so it gave you energy you could borrow certainly from somebody else. Number two, the second part, which I think is the most important, is what? Say it again. You feel like you deserved it. Why? Because now I'm sacrificed. I'm listening to shit early. I can listen to the radio, or I can listen to this podcast, or anything else. That allows me to learn more, which allows me to have something new to try, which allows me to have more certainty in how I operate. But more importantly, it's you move your temperature up on the thermostat. Now I don't just know the skill set. Now I feel like I deserve it, which means makes me fight for it harder. Does that make sense? And I talked about this last week with a bunch of people. This is my assessment of personal development. So a lot of people say, yeah, I'll do personal development, just listen to some podcasts, right? Is that truly personal development? No. Podcasts, and I'll say this, podcasts are passive. What does that mean? A lot of people are kind of blown away when I talked about this last week. This is my theory. I came up with this all myself. Personal development podcast, awesome. That's good to kind of level up, make a deposit. Does it make sense? Borrow a little bit here and there. But it's not true. Do I grow and change as a person listening to podcasts in the car? No. You have to take time to invest in number two things. Number one, it's going to be a book or a course. I go through a course like Grant Cardone or like Jordan Belford or like Jeremy Minor or whatever it is. It could be a recruiting course, be anything, whatever. If I go to that course and I'm engaged, I invest 100% focus in that course, then what happens? I grow even more. It's just something with the intensity of it. Read the book, take time to read the book, right? Start borrowing that stuff. That just grows me as a person. And what it really grows here is your self-image, right? So I grow my self-image in terms of how I'm, like Ryan says, now I feel like I'm worth more and I deserve it, so now I fight for it, and guess what comes behind it? Certainty. And then certainty brings results. Does this make sense? But I can't tell you top producers I've seen, they'll stay at the same place for 1, 2, 3, 4 years, but the reality is they don't work on this because they think they know everything. They feel like they've arrived. Nothing else I can learn, which is crazy, right? And so it's so important to understand, like, this is the secret, what needs to be done. And so, and the third piece of this that brings a little more happiness, we talk about this a lot. Anybody remember what that is? Contribution. What does that mean? Two things, giving back. Number one, giving to my clients. Meaning I come for them from a place of contribution to their life, not just making some money or a commission. But number 2, I contribute to who? My team. Why? What do you notice, Ryan, when you have to teach something to somebody? You learn it much higher, right? We talked about that. So I can understand it and go through the course, but there's things we teach a lot. Number 1, I learn it. I live it, right? Then I can lead it. But it's not until I lead it, aka teach it, do I actually have a true understanding at the highest level, because for me to be able to teach it, I have to do what? Know it at the highest level. And I've already lived it. Does that make sense? Which I think is super, super important for us to learn there with that. But for right now, I want you guys to learn, look at this as like, look, this is the secret to 2026 and where it's a little bit more chaos. We're almost there a little bit, right? You're seeing some breaks in the clouds, but it's going to take double down. Each of us has a weakness here of where we're at. People have been before a while, pretty much master a lot of these things here, right? But there's times that this goes backwards or this goes backwards. And so part of what we got to do is do what? Keep ourselves in check, be honest with ourselves, right? And say, okay, where do I need to work on this at? Like me last year, I really had to double down on this. And it's been rough, right? It's been tough. I had to double down everything. Okay, what do I need to learn? What's going on? What's changing? What's happening? Right? How do I double down on leadership? Myself, right? Gone back, doubled on myself. Lost 30 pounds, right? It's one of those things that you have to make sure that you're all right, where do I have this piece so I can solidify this even more? And in many cases, as things get tough, I have to do what? Make this a little bit stronger, right? So that I can resist more. Does this make sense? And so that's the key thing. And I want you guys to circle on your own place. Okay, where do I need to look? Do 1, 2, and 3. Like, what's the number one most important thing for me to work on right now? Number 2 and number 3. Could be on the, listing side, right? Price reductions, conversion, whatever it is. This is something that I've really been working on personal development. There's a skill set. There's somebody somewhere in this country selling a lot of There's guys last week that I was talking to, their business is up 100%, 50%. I'm like, well, what are they doing that I'm not doing? And so I started asking around and figuring things out. And it's like, all right, there's a couple little things differently. Most of the time, you're a few tweaks off where you need to be, but it's not until you're willing to drop the ego and start investigating what you're missing that you're going to be able to get through that process to find the next level. Does that make sense? And so the depth of growth is the thing you got it figured out. Questions about this? Feedback about this? What do you got, Roman?
I think the biggest thing is just dropping the ego. That's the hardest part, especially for me. Just kind of realizing, kind of like sucking up, like where I want to be at and the steps you need to take to get there. Especially with the business side, I don't really have to worry about the home side really. The self side I've been working on tremendously, but just the business side,
And what have you noticed already since you started working on yourself?
Just the way I feel in the morning and the way I kind of attack the day and just the way I look and just overall feel.
Same thing I was telling Ryan, the same guy that gets to the gym on the exact minute, right, is the same guy that makes his phone calls in the afternoon, right? Why? Because it's my obsession with how to do anything, how to do everything, right? The same guy that gets up with his alarm goes off, the first alarm instead of 6 alarms, is the same guy that's got discipline to make sure everything handled at home and at work. Does that make sense? And so these small things that start with alignment with self, right, true integrity when no one's watching is what bleeds into everything else. And so if I don't have this down, all this here is fake. Why? Because I'm a liar, right? And I know that, and deep down I know that on the inside, which costs me the results I want on the back end. Does that make sense for you guys? And so it's super important. One quick thing I thought was important, too, I want you guys to write this. Somebody has a job, right? You have a job, you have to do it, right? That's have to. You have a career, you get to do it. But if you got a mission, you're on fire for it. Does that make sense? Like, you got a mission. Like, dude, I'm here to sell some houses so I can create, a different lineage for my family and own houses and rental properties and money and things like that. Does that make sense? I'm here to help change lives for people and help them be able to have home ownership and increase their net worth 43 times that of a renter. And like, you have to tie that to something bigger where it has you something. One thing we talked about last week, I got this from Dustin, but he said, look, how many people they get on a mission to like buy a new car, and what happens? They buy the damn car. I don't know how many guys I know that have $100,000 cars that can't afford it. Right? But they get on a mission, what do? Everything. At night, they're looking up the comps. They're on the couch at night on the computer, studying cars, finding ways to get it. And ultimately, in many cases, what happens? They become so obsessed when they get it, right? Because it becomes a mission. And so the question for you is, like, how do I move myself through having a job, through having a career, to having a mission of like, look, this is what I do, and this is how I'm going to build wealth for my family and be able to change lives, right? It's not just selling homes and selling real estate. It's like, how do I do this, and how do I create wealth for myself? Real estate's the number one most valuable wealth tool in the world. I got to be able to buy some shit. And to do that, I got to be able to make some money. And so this is a key part here. And then that creates obviously leverage for you, but this gets getting clear with what my mission is. Super important part there. Makes sense? And I think the other thing too is like, this is another good example I got along with this too, of like, you got to look at number 2, how you talk about your business, right? And this is a good point. And so here's the thing, like, you have to be in alignment with my business part too. And what does that mean? It means, how do I talk about it? Right? And that's your business, right? And that, what do you guys think I mean by that?
Like when you say like, you have to go to work, like you're like, oh, I gotta go.
Yeah, I heard you make a thing a few minutes ago. Like, oh, whatever, right? It's one of those things. It's like, hey, if here's the thing. I'll give you a great example for it. If your business was a person, would it give you more or would it bounce? If your business was a person, would it give you more, aka money, or would it bounce? Being around you and how you talk to it. Right? Like, for example, I'm like, I hate Lucas, but I want to have a good relationship with him. Right? How does that work? No, man, fuck, Lucas is terrible, man. This sucks. Like, I hate dealing with Lucas, but like, man, I need a friendship with Lucas. Right? Would you hang around very long? No, right? Because why? We're not in alignment, right? Alignment is, okay, how do I change language about my business, right? Hey, I'm getting through business, my business is growing. And so that goes back to your language and the way you view your business. But ultimately, most people in business don't pay them more because the language, the way they look at it, the way they treat it. And this is about the example of being in alignment with my business. Does that make sense? And so the great thing to talk about is that, number 1, right, is that would you balance or would you give it more? And so that's the key part, is you want to make sure you turn your job into a career, turn your career into a mission, and you'll always get your mission when you're focused on getting what you want. And so that's super important in terms of that, right? Decide what value and what you value, and you work on personal development to get there with that. And so that's a key part of that with that, right? Everyone has problems. Difference is how you respond to them, right? Problems, in most cases, God demanding you step up and get to the next level. Say it again. Problems are God demanding you step up and get to the next level, right? And here's the thing. So let's say, does that mean my business has to be perfect? No, but here's the thing. I can have anger, but anger channeled the right way is not a bad emotion. Does that make sense? And so there's no such thing as a bad emotion. I got to make sure I channel. So if somebody dies, right? Is it bad to be sad? No, it's the right emotion, right? And so that's okay to be sad in that. It's okay to be angry sometimes here, but you got to make sure I don't channel the energy at the business. I use the energy from the anger to channel me to get to work in business. Does that make sense? And this all comes down to, number 1, stories and decision how I drive that and what that story is. Does that make sense? Which I think is super important to look at overall. And here's the other thing too, is like, just make sure you get around people that are further than you, right? They're not pulling you down, which is super important, and what that is. Other quick things too, right? If I don't have what I want in business, what fixes that? I got this one does too last week. 20 connects, period. He talked about last week. Here's the deal. 20 connects fixes everything. So here's the crazy part. If I don't have the money I want, I find a way to make 20 connects. Well, here's the thing. Is there anybody that can't make 20 connects in here, really? Nope. It's just a matter of doing what? Committing. Now, if they have 0 pending, what do you think the standard is in their office? 40 connects. Why? You have nothing else to do, right? They claim they're showing property, but obviously you're not showing that much property because you don't have any pendings. And if you are showing property, guess what? I'm not showing property to the right people. And so that means you need to go back to the drawing board and do what? More connects, which I think is super important to do, right? We're very important with that. And I think I had a couple other things too. Yeah, 5 pending. If you have over 5 pending, so we'll put over 5. Well, 5, that's 10 connects. Less than 5, 20 connects. Fixes everything, right? It simplifies the business. Does it make sense? And there's a great example. He said, hey, look, we want to be like the prison yard of people who are fit. Like, you can be fit by just eating chicken and vegetables, right? And doing some pull-ups and push-ups and sit-ups. That's people do on the prison part. Or you can go to Equinox and do all this fancy, doesn't really do anything, right? They spend $200-300 a month on a membership. They go and play around a little bit on the elliptical, and guess what they have? No results, right? And so you ask yourself, am I willing to do what it takes here to get this part? And here's the cool part. If I do this right, I don't got to do this forever. This right here, I want you to talk about this too. This is a season based on where I'm at. Once I get to 5+ pending, this becomes pretty easy. 10 connects a day is not that bad. I mean, you talk to 10 people for 2 minutes. Not a whole lot to do. But that maintains where you're at, and that keeps momentum going. Then I get past client referrals. I get things like that, repeat business. It makes a massive difference, right? But just go back. What are we doing here? We're overcomplicating it out of avoidance. Does that make sense? And that comes back to what? Alignment with self. And so ask yourself this, what am I avoiding? Right? That's keeping me from making those connections when I need to do. Questions about that?
I was just going to say, earlier, you talked about living in integrity with yourself and being 100% accountable. I think when you ultimately blame everything on yourself, for lack of a better way of saying it, you also can have higher integrity with other people around you, and if you know what you're going to say you're going to do and stuff like that. The other thing, too, there's a psychological principle that's saying, like, when it comes to personal development, if you have a destination that's 3 miles away, you'll probably take a car, but if you have one that's only 5 miles, or like 5 minutes away, you'll walk, right?
Right.
I think sometimes people are better off if things get worse, because then they'll do what it takes in order to get to that 3-mile destination faster, and ultimately you'll be better. So sometimes I think people, when things are just good enough, they kind of just hold on to that.
Yeah.
And they don't do what it takes in order to get to that destination, which is actually much further away than they think. So.
100%, right? And so just got to come back of like, look, man, and here's the thing. It's probably easier to drive 3 miles than to walk 5. Or let's say probably easier to drive 10 miles than to walk 5 miles.
Yeah.
Most people rather just walk 5.
Yeah.
Which is less painful than what you're doing from a cost standpoint. Does it make sense? You'll find it's easier to sell 40 homes if you do it right than it is to probably sell 6 or 7 not knowing what the hell you're doing. Makes sense? It's way more painful to get beat up and sell 7, 8, 9, 10 homes a year than you actually get an expert where things become much easier. Different pressure, different levels, but much more rewarding and much different problems. Does that make sense? And so that's the way to look at it overall with that. And so that's important to kind of look at as well. Questions about anybody else? Any more feedback? Right? I think it's important. Jeremy, what did you take from that?